director of Limerick Writers Centre with Dominic, and this is part of our ongoing mission to record publicly the literary heritage of Limerick, and we've been on this task, this mission for quite a while. We started off with a plaque for Robert Graves, who lived in Limerick, and his grandfather was, great-grandfather was bishop in Limerick at the time. He was here stationed when he was in the army, and he frequented the Locke Bar quite often. So there's a plaque there outside the Locke Bar. And each year we walk across to his grandfather's grave, and we have a reading. So we record his time in Limerick. Desmond O'Grady, our own Desmond O'Grady, we've recorded with a plaque outside the White House, his spiritual home and the start of perhaps a great period of literary activity in Limerick. And we were delighted that Michael D Higgins, the President, came down and spoke so eloquently on that day. Frank McCourt we recorded at South Bar, where the young Frank had his first pint of Guinness when I think he was 16. His father brought him in. And we were delighted that Alfie McCourt came across for that. And Richard Harris in Charlie St. George. Richard, of course, tremendous actor and film star, but also a writer and a poet, and some fine poets, and hopefully one of our future projects is there's many unpublished poems by Richard Harris. Some are very good quality, and with the cooperation of Jared, we're hoping to publish a booklet of his poetry, a book of his poetry. And today is one more event in that process. Now you might wonder, why are we in Costa's Coffee Bar upstairs, about to launch another of our plaques? Why Costa's? Well, this, many of you obviously will know, but not everybody will know. This is the site of Cruises Hotel. Martine tells me it closed about 20 years ago, but it's been here for a very long time. It's a very distinguished and large building, and very crucial. Both the owners and the visitors were very central to the history of this city. It's not the time for a lecture on Cruises Hotel, but if I just run through some of the people who came here, in terms of literature, Tennyson stayed here, Thackeray stayed here. In terms of musicians, Franz Liszt, the composer, stayed here. Daniel O'Connell, on this very floor, possibly at this level in this room, there was a portico over the entrance to the Cruises Hotel, and he went out on the balcony and addressed one of the greatest crowds that he addressed during his own election campaign. Everybody who was anybody in Irish, Parnell, John Redmond, John Dillon, all were here. And much more recently, politicians, I'm not sure if people could add to this list. I was intrigued to find that Nixon stayed here, and so did Ted Kennedy. So a long, illustrious list of people. And of course, the person we're going to commemorate today also stayed here. So that's us. Limerick Writers Centre are delighted to take it. We're delighted to see so many of you here. And we're going to carry on proceedings, and I'll introduce you to the director of Limerick Writers Centre, Dominic Taylor. Thanks, Donald. Ladies and gentlemen, Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol, Oliver Twist, the library books we read as children, 19th century London, Charles Dickens. There are so many cliches and stereotypes associated with the words Charles Dickens. We think of an earnest, industrious writer from Victorian times who turned out over 20 novels. We even have the word Dickensian. But Dickens is more than A Christmas Carol. He is more than the famous Oliver in Oliver Twist. He is more than Little Nell in The Old Curiosity Shop. This afternoon, I would like to remember and evoke the social commitment of Charles Dickens. His childhood deprivation. Dickens left school to work in a factory when his father was incarcerated in the debtor's prison. This gave him a strong sense of life's insecurities and injustices which lasted a lifetime. Dickens created works which expose the evils and inequalities of his age and which today speak to a new generation. Dickens was frequently an outraged reformer, uncompromising in his attacks on privileged interests. His campaign for social reform was his consuming passion. In a relentless series of pamphlets and articles, he made known the plight of the poor, the neglected, and the forgotten. Especially, he demanded more opportunities for underprivileged young people. By his death in 1870, Dickens had done more than any politician to make the upper classes understand that the poor were not working animals, but people. Today, as I have alluded to, his works are often attacked for their supposed sentimentality, but he was no victim of nostalgia. It was the progress of humanity, right down to the last individual, that concerned him. Karl Marx asserted that Dickens issued to the world more political and social truths that have been uttered by all the professional politicians, publicists, and moralists put together. Charles Dickens was one of the most socially engaged of all fiction writers and believed that the novel could be a powerful instrument for change. Central to his views was a belief in the restorative power of the imagination and human compassion. Dickens wanted to teach the hardest workers at this whirling wheel of toil that their lot is not necessarily a simple, brutal fact, excluded from the sympathies and graces of imagination. As G.K. Chesterton once said, Dickens' greatest attribute was that his books encouraged anybody to be anything. Today, let us remember a writer who had the illimitable enthusiasm and compassion of a man who dared his readers to imagine a better future. And putting this in the context of this event, since its establishment in 2008, the Limerick Writers' Centre has endeavoured to carve out a unique position in relation to literature in Limerick. One of our key characteristics has been our accessibility. We willingly embrace and encourage diverse voices within the community. We believe that writing and literature, such as prose, poetry, memoir, etc., matters the way it has always mattered, to make sense out of our emotional lives, to show us the possibilities of language. Today, we are in a world in which the young, especially the young, but not just the young, are living in a time of uncertainty and insecurity. A time in which every day, at every time, someone is selling you cheap illusions of happiness. Times which sometimes try to make young men and women believe that the solution to their problems lies in a powder, or even in that ultimate negation of life, suicide. It is important in these days, in these times, for people to discover, as Charles Dickens reminds us, that there are other ways to understand and live full lives. Poverty, today, as in Dickens' time, inflicts damage, not just physical and emotional damage, but a profound spiritual damage. When people feel ground down and disempowered, surely one of the greatest remedies for health and for general well-being is education. Education, even more than money, even more than a family's income, is still the decisive overriding factor. And like our own Frank McCourt, Dickens had a profound interest in education. He was a strong believer in universal, non-sectarian education. In a speech of 1844, he said, "If you want to eradicate evil or correct what is bad, education is the one thing needful and the one effective end." At the Limerick Writers' Centre, we believe, as the Italian writer Anna Maria Ortese put it, we believe that the possession of a means of self-expression is a vital part of life. The possession of a means of self-expression and an education in its use might provide us at certain moments what she called a parachute in life. There are moments when we all need that parachute. A means of self-expression surely brings the ability to engage with the world of reality, in the way that's right and proper for the human soul, through the exercise of creativity. Today, let us remember Charles Dickens through celebrating his ideas on education, creativity, and the restorative powers of the imagination and compassion. Thank you very much. As usual, wonderful words, incisive words from Dominic. Thank you, Dominic. Now it's a pleasure to introduce Sharon Slater, who's a local historian and is the owner of that wonderful site, Limerick Life, on the web, on the internet. Sharon.
First, I'd like to thank the Limerick Writers' Centre for asking me to say a few words on Limerick in 1858. As was already mentioned, this was Cruise's Hotel at the time, and a lot has changed from 1858 to now, and a lot has stayed the same. In Limerick in 1858 was a real tale of two cities. There were those who could afford to go and see Mr. Dickens, and those who could not. On one side, the city was a rich and vibrant place to be, with lots of employment in the many factories. The girls and women worked primarily in the Limerick clothing factory and in the Limerick lace factories, while the men and boys worked in the bacon factories and on the docks and in the mills. Our very own Michael Hogan, the Bard of Thomond, worked in Russell's Mill on the canal at the time in 1858, while his poems were being published in the local press. This was the same year that we got our building at the railway station. We had the train track, but we didn't have the building. So now you could travel from Limerick to Dublin by carriage, by rail, and also by canal. The canal was open at the time, and it was a very common form of transport throughout the country. Once people arrived in the city, they were met by hawkers who would be plying their goods to the incoming visitors. You'd arrive in the city and somebody would have a bit of lace to wave at you and trying to get your few pence. The mail arrived in Limerick twice a day, at 5 to 3 in the morning and at 2:05 in the afternoon, and it was sent out at 11 o'clock in the morning and at 9:05 each evening from just down the road in Russell Street. The Georgian houses in the city, as we see them now, but at the time they were still occupied by the well-to-do families, with an army of servants, both living and working in the main streets, causing the city to have a constant hustle and bustle. Each of the houses on the Georgian area had access to a sewer, so household waste wasn't going onto the streets in this area. Though the streets were still filthy, as they were made of a clay and stone mix, which would become dusty during the summer and slippery during the winter. And that's not to mention all the animals roaming around our streets, be they horses pulling carriages, or those on the way to the factories in the city, or to the markets which were held every Wednesday and every Saturday, while the large fairs were on four times a year. Even Mr. Dickens himself noted waterfowl wandering around even these wealthier areas. The newer Georgian area had plush drapery stores and theatres, social clubs and balls. The mayor at the time was Edmund Gavitt. Families such as Spates, Barrington, O'Mara, Tate were noted in the city, and we still remember those names today because they left their indelible mark on us as a city. Penny's, as we see it now, was Cannock's at the time, and that same year it had just reopened after an extensive build. So the building that people knew before Penny's was here was the building that was in situ in 1858, on that same year that Mr. Dickens came to the city. The apprentices in Cannock's lived in the building, as they did in most of the city stores. So during the night, the city was still alive. It was still alive with the hustle and bustle of people. There were 5 newspapers in the city at the time. The Limerick Chronicle is the only one that remains today. These newspapers were filled with quack medicines for all ailments, as well as local gossip and news from further afield. All 5 of these papers reported on Mr. Dickens's visit. There were only 3 dentists in the city, but we had 5 rope makers, so I wonder if they contributed to the dentist industry. On the other side, though, the city was thronged with poverty. Although the famine had ended 8 years before, the effects were still being felt throughout the countryside. The older sections of the city in the English town and Irish town had become derelict after those who could afford to move to the new Georgian area did. The area of the old city experienced extremely poor sanitation, and large families shared single rooms. Infectious illnesses such as TB and cholera were rife. These rooms weren't just shared with the families, they were shared with the livestock as well. Most families had their own pig that they would bring into the bacon factories. Thousands of families from the outlying countryside made their way into the city, either to the workhouse or to board a ship sailing for America or Australia. The workhouse, which is now St. Camillus', the infirmary, which is now Limerick College of Further Education, the Fever and Lock Hospital, now St. John's Hospital, the Magdalen Asylum, now the Art College, the Lunatic Asylum, now St. Joseph's, and the Foundling Hospital were all packed to capacity and beyond. St. Bridget's burial ground, also known as the Yellow Hole, became the last resting place for the poorest in the community, who ended their days in the workhouse. Many of these people coming into the city to find their last refuge, but ending up in a communal plot with no name and no marker. While Mount St. Lawrence Cemetery had only recently opened for those who could afford it, and there were many who could afford it. The population of Limerick had dropped by 50,000 from 250,000 between 1851 and 1861. In 1858, we had not only Mr. Dickens come to the city and stay in Cruise's Hotel and speak in the Theatre Royal. We also had Lola Montez, who was a woman of Limerick heritage. She claimed to be from Limerick herself, though it was recently discovered she was actually born in Sligo. Lola Montez, if you don't know, caused the abdication of King Ludwig of Bavaria. She was famed around the world for her spider dance. She was an exotic dancer who brought down royalty. Though Mr. Dickens, while he was staying in the city, would have been confined to the wealthier area, to this Georgian area of the city. It was such a hive of activity that he would have undoubtedly have seen citizens of all classes, and he would have recognised similarities to the people in the city and the places to those that he described in his novels. Thank you.
I'm not sure about the next bit. I wasn't sure how to introduce the next bit. Whether to say some form of metapsychosis had taken place and words had brought back a great member of the past. But it's rare. We're going to have a plaque unveiled and we have the actual person sitting in the room at the same time. But I'm delighted to introduce Lawrence Foster, whose own personal history is a run through the tour de force through theatre, the history of theatre in Ireland. First came to Ireland as leading man for Annie McMaster's Memorial Company and stayed and has appeared in many productions, and particularly a radio career successful where he regularly entertained you in your living rooms as Harry Murphy in Harbour Hotel. Tonight, and we hope many of you are coming to that as well, at the Bell Table, Lawrence will give us his internationally renowned one-man show on Dickens, and we're delighted to have him come to Limerick to perform that. But for now, I invite Lawrence Foster to come and speak a little.
Ladies and gentlemen, honoured guests, I shall be brief, which is not usually my wont. As you may know, I have no faith in statues, and I certainly would not do anything in any way to help towards the remembrance of any person in that way. I have an anathema of statues. They are not living. However, a celebratory plaque to the one and only inimitable does not rankle with me one jot. In fact, I salute the elders of Limerick for their sense of occasion, for their impeccable taste. And so, without further ado, I have great pleasure in unveiling this memorial to erstwhile travellers and a very special hostelry. Thank you.
Finally, before we finish, another member of Limerick Writers' Centre, Fiona, is here at Plaque. In her own right, she's a writer, playwright, a lecturer in creative writing, and she's going to entertain you a little bit with We're in Limerick, with some limericks about Dickens.
I'm a great Dickens fan, and also a fan of Limerick and limericks. And so, because of this, I'd like to share with you a few yet unknown facts about Mr. Dickens and his relationship with Limerick. Quite unfairly, I think, Dickens has been reproached with having written for money. Robert Patten in Charles Dickens and His Publishers writes, and I quote, "His novels are so long because he was paid by the word or the line." The implication being that Dickens sacrificed his artistic scruples to his bank account. And Ruskin also said he slaughtered characters as a butcher kills a lamb to satisfy the market. Well, of course Dickens wrote for money. Wouldn't we all if we could? But now, Dickens and the Limerick connection has a lot to do with, to contribute to his defence in this matter and to his amazing output. It's said, I'm not sure who by whom, that Dickens, like all of us writers, suffered occasionally from writer's block. And like all writers, he blamed this on his publisher. And it's also said that his visit to Limerick sparked off ideas that helped unlock this fount of creativity, and that further, in his anticipation of his sojourn in Limerick, he would warm up by writing limericks. And that would be before he sat down and created characters. Now, sadly, none of these gems have survived, or so it was thought. Until in an attic in this very establishment, the other day, a sheaf of papers in Dickens' own handwriting happened to come our way. And they were written, some of these limericks, just before his sojourn in Limerick itself, and he was so pleased with them that he brought them along in his luggage. Demands from his publishers, writer's block, plot ideas. Well, yes, they go something like this. This is one of them. My publisher's knocks at the door are sapping my creative store. But this Limerick visit might cure it. Or is it someone else that is asking for more? Another thing that I discovered about Dickens was that, again, like all writers, he'd have a few ideas in the middle of the night, and that he'd write down these dreams or ideas and even some criticism of them in the morning in the limerick form. Here's one of them. "'Twas the night Marley's ghost came to call, prompted Scrooge to reform, I recall. Sentimental, methinks, to indulge in high jinks at the Fezziwig's seasonal ball." Another thing you might not know about Dickens was that he used to come up with his titles before writing the novel. You can imagine it, can't you? The excitement he felt at the prospect of visiting Limerick City from London. "A tale of two cities." That's hot. Sure, I can come up with a plot between Limerick and here to raise smiles or a tear. "Mr. Sarsfield O'Carton." Perhaps not. You know, he couldn't leave this one alone, this linking of the two cities, could he? "I could write of a city or two. London, Limerick, or Paris will do. I'll have him announce as he, on the steps as he mounts, 'tis a far better thing that I do." And finally, here's one in praise of the man himself, and this space commemorating his visit. "The works penned by the alias Boz we've commended today here because in this very location he received an ovation. The best of times, as he told them, it was." Thank you very much indeed. Welcome to you all, and please enjoy the rest of the morning, and we'll see you at the bell table this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. We do need to say thank you to the management of Costa's for welcoming us, for giving us this lovely space, so thank you very much to them. I'd like to see John Murphy over there. You can't be in two places tonight. The Theatre Royal, Kevin Kiley's production, is on tonight, and tomorrow night's the last night, is it? Tickets are going fast, so if don't go tonight. Come to us tonight at the bell table. But tomorrow night, you can go to see John. I gather it's a stunning production. Thank you very much for everyone, and keep an eye out on the internet, listening to Between the Pages on Limerick City Community Radio. Follow our websites, because Limerick Writer Centre is always very, very busy. Thank you very much.
When the road gets too long and you run all out of song, and the time gets too much for you to bear, yeah. Turn around, turn around, turn around, and I'll be there. Like a road leading home. When the day has passed and gone, and the